Okay, so to be clear, we have to realize that there's cause and effect, and due to the inducement that happened right from the beginning, and realizing you as a child could never have been responsible for the inducement or for any trespass at that stage, uh, the state is absolutely responsible, and because the state has their legal team, because they're guilty of something. That's why they need a legal team. In fact, you'll find that in Canada, the Office of the Registrar General in the provincial parliaments, they have an actual legal representative speak for them when there's ever any question that involves birth registration or birth certificates or the issues of that. Why do they need a legal representative to speak for them? Because the office is guilty of a tort against the child. They violated the child's privacy, and they needed it to operate the in sin you are, because that's really in debt you are. You would have to have your in name, your private name, in the debt. So they had to have it on the paper so that they could use that to create the certificate. Without the private name on the public record, they couldn't have pulled it off. So it's quite a devious plot, but it's there, and active state is responsible. So when we go back to who are you going to be talking to, well, we mentioned in a previous video when I was defining active state, because active state, not to be confused with active God, you were certainly an active God, but an active state is dealing only in the legal system, dealing only with the legal assigned surname. So it says active state, and I'm going to read this again so we go very slowly on this, in the broad sense of the term. Uh-oh, there's the broad way leading to destruction. Many lawful acts of the executive government and many instances of the exercise of the prerogative of the crown might be designated acts of state. There is a narrower sense. I love that. Now we're on the narrow road. And that is in which the term is more technically, technical comes from the word subtle. The serpent was the most subtle creature in the garden. Tech, web, as the etymology. There is a narrower sense, and that in which the term is more technically, if not exclusively, employed, there's the word ploy, which related to acts done or adopted by ruling powers of independent states, same as provinces, in their political and sovereign capacity, particularly an act injurious to the person or to the property of some person who is not at the time of that act a subject of Her Majesty, which act is done by any representative of Her Majesty's authority, civil or military. Well, the Vital Statistics Act has a civil authority, which is the Registrar General. So they are the damaging party. They're the ones who actually are responsible for the inducement. Had not that box to place the given name be in there, knowing that that's a God-forgiven name, absolved, they couldn't have induced someone to believe that they had an entitlement to the last name. But because the box is there, and then you're trained in the public system to actually start to trespass on it from the earliest age. So you're trained in school, cursive writing, to be under the curse of the law, start even forming twisted little snake letters in order to make a signature so they can have a heartbeat, you know, for someone who really is part of something that's dead. Their legal body corporate. A dead body. That's why it's an unclean thing. We're not supposed to be touching it. With our private God-given name. On its own, it has no power. It's powerless. You're giving it power. You're part of a collective power that's energizing the very thing that is torturing you at this moment. So, when it said there, an act done by any representative of Her Majesty's authority, civil or military, that would include the Registrar General's office. This, whether it says here, this definition for active state, it still applies in places that don't have Her Majesty. So the legal state, wherever you're from, would have the same system, and the registrar that deals with the birth registration did the very same thing to you as it did to me by having our parents inform and place your good name into their bad title. And therefore, that's how you were trained to believe and be deceived into touching or thinking that you had the right to privately claim a public title. Remove your private, the public can't harm you anymore because they don't even know who you are anymore. Your private name is off the record, not on the record. We were considered to be in the world, but not of it. In is different than of. So how ridiculous some of the sovereignty freeman movements were actually putting a colon between their given name and the public state surname. And they said, oh yeah, it's just their computers are all messed up. You need to put a colon in between. Now it works differently. And I said, no, you just said you're of the world because the surname represents the material world of commerce and trade. It's not spiritual. So your spiritual name may be in the world, but it's not of the world. Therefore, by removing your private name out, they've only got the world. They don't have your spirit or your consent. And therefore, everything collapses. The whole cards collapse. So who are you going to be communicating with? The source of where it began. The Registrar General's office, whoever is the head department for where the birth registration occurred, period. And even if you've migrated from one place to another country, you can still tell the chief authority of where you came in through citizenship that you're removing your private name from the public register. That's the end all do all of this entire subject matter. The only thing that's causing it is your consent, and consent makes the contract.